morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another with Ria and I. We are talking about real estate. We're talking about mindset, and thank you so much for always tuning in to your success. And today, Ria, she's going to be taking over the conversation. But before I do bring Ria on, I want to introduce myself. I want to introduce us, and my name is Alka.
My name is Rhea, and
And
welcome
welcome
to
to
our
our
show.
show. We're going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Alka. And today, continuation from the book of Pace, Creative Financing, Creating Wealth Without Massive Cash. So let me try to share my screen. All right. So this is a continuation from the book of Pace, Morby, which is Creative Financing. So according to Pace, Creative Financing in everyday life, and how his family, his mom and dad use creative financing. And this is growing up, this is what he sees every day from his parents, and he's able to translate it to real estate. So first, let's listen and learn how Pace, as he grew up, how his dad and mom used creative financing. So how his dad bought houses. So creative finance is a way to buy anything. Remember, anything without a great credit, to buy anything without great credentials, or to buy anything without cash. So if a person does not have credit, if a person does not have great credentials, and if the person does not have a lot of cash when buying real estate, because when you buy real estate, it requires a lot of cash, right? So the answer to our problem is creative financing. So Pay's parents had 12 kids, and his dad was always self-employed. So he has a job, but he's working for himself. Because of this, his dad could not buy a house in traditional manner, which means traditional manner is going to a bank and saying to Mr. Banker, "Hey, Mr. Banker, I need to buy a home." Because why? Like I said, his dad was self-employed. So it's a little bit hard for people who are self-employed to buy houses in traditional manner. So his dad figured something else, which is called seller financing, which is one of the creative financing. There's other ways, and seller finance is just one of the creative ways of buying things or buying real estate. Now, the problem was, according to Pace, his dad did not use it for investment properties. So the creative financing was only applied to buying their home one thing at a time, because they moved 12, several times. His dad used to keep a roof over his family's head. So he only used it to buy his own personal home. His dad didn't use it to buy investment properties. But mind you, this can be used for either for your personal home or for your investment properties or anything in general. Now, Pace and his family moved 26 times. So that's a lot of moving before Pace turned 19 years old. So every time they moved, his dad would buy a new house on seller financing or subject to or lease option. So these are the ways for creative financing. So remember, creative financing is when you don't have good credit, a cash, or good credit, good cash, or credentials. You don't have, a doctor's degree or a degree where the bank would say, "Oh, you're not employed, so we can't lend to you." So in this situation, creative financing would require the seller to finance a subject to and lease option. And I'll get into these details later on. So seller finance, from the word seller. So if you want to buy a property, for example, I want to buy a property, I am the buyer, and the person that I want the property from, the person who owns the property, is the seller. So from the word seller finance, your banker, your financer would be the seller. Now, this works if the owner, okay, of the property actually owns it 100%. So seller finance means his dad went to someone who already owned the property and bought it from them without having to get a bank involved at all. So not using a bank, right? And directly going to the owner who owns it 100% outright, owned by the seller. So that's why it's called seller financing. Subject to, so subject to, this means that this is the house is not owned 100%. There may be some mortgage left onto the property or anything in particular. Okay, subject to. So his dad did the same thing, but the owner did not own the house outright. So what the buyer would do is that his dad, in this case, took over the payments on the mortgage. So took over is very different from having, uh, so taking over is very different from your name being on the mortgage. So the owner in this situation, the seller, is still the owner, still holds the mortgage. He is just taking over. The dad of Pace is just taking over the payments, but the owner is still the owner of the property. His name is still on the deed. So that's the subject to. It gave the owner some additional money. So in order for the owner to do this subject to, you would have to pay higher. But that's okay, because why? You would not be able to buy a house, or you not necessarily buy it. You would not have the ability of controlling a house without the subject to. So you have to give more, a little bit more to the owner who's willing to do the subject to. So lease option, lease option. So for example, this is very commonly done in real estate. So for example, if you have a property and you're renting it out, and then your tenant wants to buy it, but they don't have the cash, this is what they use, a lease option. So they're leasing and they have the option to buy it at some point in time. So the the dad of Pace would create the contract with the homeowner that stated he could either buy the house, he could buy the house, or move after a period of time. So what does it mean move after a certain period of time? Meaning the renter who wants to buy the property initially would not like to proceed in buying the house. So because he does not want to proceed in buying the home, then he has to move a period of time. So lease option. So you're leasing and you're telling the owner, hey, I want to have this in contract. I want to have the option to buy this property at some point in time. Now, the beauty of it is that you could back out if you think that you have to move or you cannot afford it or your circumstances change. You could say to the buyer, to the owner, that hey, I cannot continue executing the lease option. I gotta move. So this way, he could lock in a lower rate and choose to buy or to move later on. His dad used these methods 26 times, but his dad was too busy with his daily work to see how he could use them to make more money. So, like what Pei said, he only used it to buy a home 26 times, but never used it for investment properties. He could have if he had taken the time to apply it. Now, let's talk about Pace Moms, which is another way of creative financing. So, Pace Mom's craft business. So, Pace had 12 siblings. So, when the holidays came around, it was time for prom. His mom would make everything by hand, outfit, um, gifts. So his mom would do the crafts. So she would make it. So his mom started doing this out of necessity for the kids. There's a lot of kids, right? So the mom realized that she could make a little extra of money on the side. Before long, she got so good and so popular, she had a wait list for her products. Unfortunately, that did not mean she had extra money for more supplies. So, because she did not have extra money, this is where creative financing takes place. You gotta be genius on how to buy the supplies. So, Pay's mom would go to the Michaels. Michaels here in USA is a craft and hobby store. And she would go there and check the price of the materials. Then Pay's mom wanted to make more items and sell them. So she had to look into ways of getting some credit, some store credit. Pay's mom found people from the church to buy the materials for her because she cannot get the store credit. So one of the creative financing that the mother of Pace used is she found other people, other people, right? Other people from the church to buy the materials for her. And what her mom would do is she would then pay the church friends the money. Now, another example of creative financing, the story of Pace using his F-150. F-150 is a truck. So when Pace was a contractor, he had this F-150 truck that he cherished, but he did not need anymore. Because why? It's old. It's more than 300,000 miles on it. Now, in America, we have the Kelly's Blue Book. The Blue Book is actually a book that tells you the value of the vehicle. In this case, the Kelly's Blue Book value of the F-150 was only 5,000. 5,000. But Pace knew in his heart that it is worth more than 5,000. So Pace listed it on Craigslist. At that time, Craigslist was very popular. So he listed it on 10,000. He got zero calls, no calls at all. Because why? The buyers think it was too much for a more than 300,000 mileage F-150. And no one cared what Pace thought about the truck and his personal interests on the truck. Everyone only cared for what the Kelly Blue Book value was, which was 5,000 on the Blue Book. So that's why he didn't get any calls, zero calls, when he listed the truck for 10,000. So Laura, Pace's wife, told him, why not just sell the F-150 truck with creative financing? Sell the F-150 truck with creative finance? So Pace made one small change, and this is what it is. F-150 will take payments. That's it. His advertisement only consisted of this. F-150 will take payments. And after that minor tweak, Pace was flooded with a lot of offers. And in 45 minutes, he had to shut the advertisement down. Can you imagine how much buyers want to buy that with just a small little tweak? F-150 will take payments. Pace never reduced the price. It was still 10,000. It was still 10,000. He just added F-150 will take payments. So what that means is not everyone had extra 10,000, but anyone with a job could make payments. They could make payments on that 10,000 every every month, for example. So, what happened? Pace sold the truck for 12,500, more than his asking price of 10,000. And you would say, how did he do that? When he was asking 10,000 only? Because he used payments, right? He added 2,500 more for the credit. for the creative financing. Okay? So 2,500 plus 10,000, Pace got 12,500 because Pace gave someone the ability to make payments. So either he was paying Pace, $500 per month. I don't know what their agreement was. Or the person could offer 5,000, which is the Kelly's Blue Book, right? And then pay every month until the buyer pays 12,500. I mean, there's so many situations, scenarios on how you can pay until you reach 12,500. So this same is true when Pace buys properties today. If you are willing to take payments, Pace is willing to pay more than anybody else. So what that means, pay more than anybody else with the F-150 truck, right? He was asking for 10,000 and 2,500 extra for the payments. So for example, this is what he said. If you are willing to take payments, this is the seller is willing to take payments, then Pace, who is the buyer, is willing to pay more than anybody else. So for example, if you have a home that you are selling for 100,000, this is just for illustration purposes. If you are a seller and you wanted 100,000 and it's sitting, right? Just like with the F-150, you have zero. Now, when you advertise it, so this one, first situation, you have zero leads. Nobody calls. Second situation, same house, you list it for 100,000 and you make a small tweak, which is will take payments. Same house, which is 100,000, will take payments. Now, the 100,000, because you are doing payment, you could say, okay, I want 10,000 more for the payments. So now, this is just an example. Now, you'll be getting 110,000 for your house. So either you could have the buyer, right, put a down payment of, let's say, 20,000. Not everybody would have the 100,000 cash. The buyer would have 20,000 down payment, and then the buyer would make you payments every month of 5,000, right? Until he pays you off with a total of 110,000. So stay tuned for more of Rhea and Alka Show. Let me know in the comment section below what you've learned from this creative financing topic. So I'll discuss more from Facebook.
Ria, that's awesome. You know what? First of all, let's talk about creative financing because not many people know the term creative financing, and this is an essential tool when we do real estate transactions and business. So, explain first of all what is creative financing, how does it happen, and what are some of the steps? Because the steps that I assume that people can take, the recommendation to is to you got to educate yourself. You got to educate, like you illustrated, if you have a house that's worth 100,000, and exactly so, what are the ways, what can you do? So number one, you can educate yourself, is to understand the seller's point of view as to how much the seller, why is he selling for the amount that he's selling, and what are the motivations that the seller might have, and also what is the seller's financials? Because if we don't understand what is the seller's financial, if we don't understand as to what is the seller's motivation, why is he selling, how much is he selling it for, why is he selling for the such and right for the X amount. So if you could explain as to this formula when it comes to creative financing and why it helps individuals.
So, like I said earlier, creative financing is when you want to buy something, an item, or a car, or a house, and you don't have any cash. Without any cash, or you don't have a good credit, right? A good credit score, and the bank would not lend you money if you don't have any good credit or good credentials. Then it's very hard for someone to buy properties or buy something. So what they do is where they do the creative finance. From the word creative, it's not the traditional route. So in the book, Pace gave three examples. One is the seller's finance. So seller, from the word seller, finance. So the seller is actually giving you the money, right? Giving you the property. Now, because this only works, seller finance only works if the owner, for example, I own the home, if I own it 100%. If I do not own it 100%, I cannot do a seller financing. Let's say I own it 100%, then I as a seller can say, "Hey, I can be your banker. I can give you the property, but you have to pay me. Instead of paying the bank, the buyer would pay me."
Okay, is there a percentage that you would pay
No,
the seller?
all
No?
on the negotiation. There is no formula. It depends on what you and the seller, what the buyer and the seller agree upon. There is no strict formula. If the seller wants 20,000 down payment because that's the only money that you have, then yes, it can work. It can work any amount
Mhm.
as long as
But you have to own it. You have to own. The seller has to own
the
the
seller
home.
has to own it in order for that to work. Second is subject to. Subject to is when for example, I own a property, but I do not own it. I have a mortgage to it. So
Mhm.
the bank owns the property. The deed is under my name because I bought it. So that seller financing cannot happen. What can happen is subject to. I own it, but the buyer is taking over my payments because why? I could not afford it anymore. So because I could not afford it and nobody wants to buy it at my price, then this buyer who is willing to do creative financing in this particular situation, it's called subject to, he will take over my payments. And that buyer, right, can give me 5,000, 10,000 for taking over my payments. So instead of either losing the property because I cannot afford it, so it goes into foreclosure. So instead of losing the property, destroying my name, I get 10,000. Again, this is no hard sets to, it's not a hard rock.
No hard rule. Yeah. Mhm.
So you can ask for any amount. You could ask 5,000, 10,000. It depends on what you and the buyer agreed. So you can say, okay, I'll do a subject to. You pay the mortgage. The deed is still under my name. The mortgage is still under my name. You pay the mortgage and you're going to give me 10,000. You pay it and then you have control of the property.
Okay,
Third,
but that's the point. Okay, that's the point. Yeah, sorry to cut you off. But that's the point. So if you buy the house from the seller and you're negotiating, like I said, you gotta it works if the seller owns the home. But if you as a buyer, you're buying the home from the seller and the house has a mortgage on it, what happens? Then are you
called
as a
sub
buyer, do you pay the mortgage? Are you paying towards the mortgage?
so this is the creative financing second example, subject to. You are not buying it yet because the mortgage belongs to the owner. You're only taking over the payments. It will be under your name once you pay the seller. Once you pay all the mortgage and all the loan that's attached to the property. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the buyer pays the mortgage.
right, but
So
it
right.
the buyer's name yet. The deed will not be under the buyer's name. It is only a subject to. The buyer is only taking over, assuming the payment of the mortgage. The mortgage
Right.
is still under the owner's, original owner's name. The deed is still under the owner's name.
Right. No, I get that. I'm just saying in terms of the mortgage. I'm just saying in terms of mortgage, just for the viewers, when they're learning, because it's all about learning.
Yes.
And so when it comes to the mortgage point, who is still paying for the mortgage? Is the seller still paying? Or is the buyer still paying? Does he have
The
to pay?
taking over the payment. He's taking over the payment. So he pays directly to the
So,
bank. Bank don't care where the money is coming from. The bank cares that the money is paid. So
yeah, exactly. That's what they care about. That it's paid off. As long as the property is paid off, the banks don't really mind as to where it's coming from. But I
yeah,
think it's good. I think it's good. I think when finding ways that people can find ways of how to make anything work, any deal, any transaction. I think it's really good. And I think um obviously I got so much information learning
don't forget
from.
the third. There's a third, which is the lease option, right?
Mm,
So third,
mhm.
so first is subject to, second is seller financing, third is a lease option. So what Pay said, if you want to buy the property, you tell your landlord, hey, I want a lease option. That means you're leasing right now and you want to buy the property later on. So if you're interested in buying that property, all the rents that you've been paying the landlord, a portion of it goes to apply. It goes to apply to the total cost of buying the home. But then you say, oh, I cannot proceed with the lease option, I'm gonna relocate. Then
Mhm.
if you put some money down for that lease option contract, you lose that money, but then you have the ability to back out and not buy his property.
Oh,
But the
mhm.
other option too, the other great option with the lease option is that if you are then decided that you want to buy the property, right, a part of your rent goes to pay the principal down.
Right. Amazing. Wait, this is such great information. People need to know as to, what are the ways that you can do it. So I hope that everyone enjoyed today's conversation, because it truly has been quite enlightening, especially for me. I took a lot of notes, and I hope you all did as well. So we have come to the end of another amazing show. And in the meantime, as always, showing up to your success is what we want. So make sure you take the chance, you take the time to know what are the ways that you can also, take hold of creative financing in your life today. Find out creative ways that you can do that. Make sure you have the rest of the day, the best of your day, and we will see you at the same time, same place tomorrow morning. Bye for now, guys.